video is covering addition and subtraction of integers. And before we begin, I think one of the major things that I need you to remember throughout this video lesson is that the number 0 is neutral. And I mentioned this in my last video on the introduction to integers. 0 is neither positive nor negative, and it will help you a lot to know this as we do addition and subtraction of integers. And before we move on, I wanted to let you know that this video covers one method of adding and subtracting integers. There are many different methods out there in terms of teaching, in terms of using manipulatives. This is one way in which I usually do this in my own classrooms that I have found to be successful throughout the years. So the first thing is that 0 is neutral, and the next thing that I would like to make everybody known is that I'm going to be using tokens in this video, and so my negative tokens or my negatives will be identified using the color red, and my positive tokens will be identified using the color blue. So just as a visual to help, along with the fact that I will be using those tokens. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get right into the addition of integers. And I'm going to start off very easy, very slow. And the first one is just 2 plus 4. And I'm sure you're watching this and you're like, I know what 2 plus 4 is right away. You probably know that it's 6, which is great. But for the purpose of this video, I just want to make it very clear. When we're dealing with integers, you have two signs, positive and negative. And you'll notice that my colors here for the 2 and the 4 are blue, which I told you refer to the positives. So what I'm going to do though is just for everybody's sake is I'm just going to rewrite it as plus or positive 2 and positive 4. Not forgetting, of course, that plus in the middle here. And what that means is basically I'm adding 2 positives and 4 positives together. And my tokens are here, so I'm just going to kind of grab them and bring them over. So I have 2 tokens of positives and 4 tokens of positives. And so of course you can count them to be that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total positive tokens. Very important that you know that it's positive tokens. So our final answer of positive 2 plus a positive 4 is positive 6 or just 6. Because as you know, when there's nothing in front of a number, it just means that it's positive. Sometimes we put the negative, sometimes we don't. So very simple. But now let's mix it up a little bit. We have a negative 2 plus 4 written here. Just to help everybody out once again, I am going to just add that there is a plus in front of this 4. So you do know that it's negative 2 plus positive 4. I hope that you see that. But as we're introducing this, it's just a good idea to go over that. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab 2 negative tokens from my side here, and I'm going to also grab 4 negative tokens, or 4 positive tokens, I'm sorry. Now what exactly does this mean and what exactly does this do? Now keeping in mind that 0 is neutral. You can get 0 because if you were to kind of connect a positive and a negative together, they equal 0. It's like they cancel each other out. And that means that they kind of disappear. They kind of disappear, or, I mean, just so that you can see this visually, they go away. They cancel each other out, and they are gone. Which means that when we add 2 negatives with 4 positives, we are simply left with 2 positive tokens. So a negative 2 added to positive 4, the answer is just positive 2. And I know that it's in pink, but I'm sure you understand that it should be in blue. It's positive 2. So that's one way of doing it, and I find it a lot easier, but I really need you to keep in mind that when you have negatives and positives, they cancel each other out until you have what's left. And the same thing goes if we're doing something like this. This is a positive 2, and once again, just so that everybody's clear, this is a positive 2 plus a negative 4. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab 2 positive tokens here and 4 negative tokens here. And when I add them together, once again, these tokens, these positive and negative tokens, they cancel each other out. Say, and it doesn't matter which tokens I picked, right? I could have picked these 2 tokens. It doesn't actually matter. But in the end, in this case, I am left with 2 negative tokens. So a positive 2 added to a negative 4 doesn't quite get us into the positives yet. It gets us into the negatives. So our answer for this one is negative 2. So that's for addition of integers. Now let's talk about subtraction of integers. And we're going to start this off very basic, of course. We have a 4 minus 2 written in front of us. And once again, I'm sure you've seen this before and you're like, I know this is 2. Of course. But for the sake of dealing with integers, especially for the first time, I'm going to remind you that it's not just 4, it's a positive 4. And it's not just 2, it's positive 2. Okay? And that will help you with your token using, if you will. So basically what we have here is we have 4 positives. And I'm just going to grab them here. And literally all we're going to do is we're going to take them away, two positives as well. And so of course you are left with 2 positive tokens. So a 4 minus 2, or a positive 4 minus a positive 2, is just positive 2 or 2, whatever you prefer. But I wanted to give you this example because as we go through the subtraction of integers, this is a very good, like, okay, I understand what you're doing, especially based on something that you already know, right? You already know that 4 minus 2 is 2, but now you see it visually with the tokens that I will be using in the following slides. Now things get a little bit interesting. I have 2 minus a negative 4. And once again, this is like 2, so positive 2, minus a negative 4. So basically what happens is I'm asking you in this question to take 2 positives and subtract 4 negatives. But we have an issue. We don't have 4 negatives. We have 2 positives. We can't physically take away 4 negatives right now because we don't have any. This is where the neutralization of that 0 and using 2 tokens, positive and negatives, come into mind. So know that this is 2, but also know that if I were to grab, say, one of these and one of the negatives, that together they cancel each other out, right? So it still is equal to 2 because this here is equal to 0. So nothing's changed. All I'm doing is I need to add some negative 4s. So I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to grab a positive and I'm going to grab a second negative, but I'm not quite at 4 negatives yet. I only have 2 negatives on my screen right now. So once again, I'm going to grab another positive and another negative, and another positive and another negative, like that. But now that I have all of these really, really nice groupings, I want to take just the negatives away. I just want to take the negatives away. So basically what happens here is I am left with, and I know that I shouldn't have overlapped them, but that's okay, you understand, taking away those 4 negatives. Look what I have left. I have actually 6 positives. So a positive 2 subtracting a negative 4, or 4 negatives, gives me actually, surprisingly, to some, positive 6, or 6 positives, or 6. And just on that note, and because this is on the screen right now, this is usually where people say the trick. Right? I'm sure some of you are like, I know the trick. The trick is that if you have a negative and a minus and a negative together, essentially what happens is they kind of miraculously do this fun thing where you can connect them and they become a plus sign. And if you do 2 plus 4, well, you get 6, which is our answer using the tokens. So it's just like a fun fact, just a fun fact there. So if you have a minus negative, a minus minus, whatever you want to call it, you just kind of connect them together and you make a plus, which is cool, which is really, really cool. So here's another example. Here it says negative 3 minus 1. But I'm going to rewrite it for you, and I'm just going to add a plus 1. So it's very important for you to identify what is negative, which ones are positive. So it's a negative 3, take away a positive 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab 3 negative tokens. But can I actually take away a positive when I don't even have any positives on my screen right now? So what I need to do is I need to grab a positive for sure because I need to take it away. But that changes things. So in order for it to not change things, I'm going to make a zero grouping, if you will. So this is equal to 0. So it's still -3 here on the board, but I've added those plus minus in order for me to have that +1. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to now be able to take away that 1, right? Because I have it. And what I'm left with is not just 3 negatives, but now I'm left with 4 negatives. So the answer for this question is -4. Once again, the reason why is because we do want to keep that -3. It's not -3, it's not -4, it's -3, but I need that positive, right? Because I need to take it away. So in order to do that, I'm going to basically bring a neutral group and then take away that 1 and see what I have left. So now that you know some tricks, now that you know the tokens that I've been using, here are 5 different questions that I'm actually going to solve in the next slides. But what I would really encourage you to do is to actually pause this video, write the numbers down and pause the videos and actually solve them on your own before moving on to see how I solve them. And I've also left them all as green, which means that it will be up to you to either color code or identify which ones are positive and which ones are, of course, negative at your own discretion. So pause this video and try it yourself before you move on to the next slides, which are the solutions. For the first question, we have 8 plus -4. And of course, I left them in green so that here I'm going to say this is actually +8. And we'll keep another neutral green plus, but also we're going to get a red -4. So we're doing 8 positives plus 4 negatives. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab 8 positives here. So from the side, I'm going to grab 8 positives. And then I'm also going to grab 4 negatives because I'm supposed to be adding 4 negatives to this. But what happens is, of course, you have these that kind of blow up or cancel out, and they actually equal to 0. So now we can pretend like they are not there. Right, they are just equal to 0. And so what I'm left with is 4 positives. So the answer to 8 plus a -4 is 4, +4, is just 4. Another way that you can look at it, just because I have it here on the screen, is sometimes I like to tell my students that usually the negative is the one in charge. So if you're getting a plus minus kind of in the middle like we have here, you have a plus minus, it's actually the same thing as just saying 8 minus 4, which is 4 like we got here. And that should be an equal sign. I'm sorry if you thought that was a negative, that should be an equal sign. So that's just also a fun fact. So if you have a plus minus, it's as though the minus takes over and you have 8 minus 4. But of course, these are just little tricks that I would only encourage you to use once you actually understand the concept behind 8 plus a -4. The second question that I gave you is written in green once again, so I'm going to rewrite it here as a -5, and we'll do minus a +2. Minus a +2, right? Because we have nothing that's really indicating that that 2 is negative, right? It's just the minus sign. So we'll have a negative, a minus plus 2. So once again here we have 5 negatives. So I'm going to start by grabbing 5 negatives from my tokens here. And the issue is that I actually can't take away 2 positives from this because there are literally no positives in my -5, right? It's just -5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create neutral groups here, 2 of them in fact, because in the end, nothing changes. I still have -5. I still have -5, but now I still have -5 because this is equal to 0 and this is equal to 0. So nothing has changed, but now I am able to remove those 2 positives because that's the point of the subtraction, and I need to remove 2 positives. So I'm going to actually just erase them. And what I have left are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 negatives. So the answer to a -5 minus 2 or a -5 minus a +2 is going to be -7 or 7 negatives. So that's the solution to number 2. For number 3, I have a 3 take away or minus a -7, and again it's in green, so I'm going to change this to a +3 minus, minus a 7 negative in red here. So I did mention in the video that you had this trick where you could combine your minuses together and create a plus. But for the sake of this video, it's very important for you to understand the concepts first before you move on to some shortcuts. So here we go. We're going to start with 3 positives. Here are my 3 positive tokens. But my issue is that I need to take away 7 of those negatives, but I don't have them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, I need for sure 7 negatives. So I'm going to grab 7 negatives, but I can't just grab them, right? Because it changes the value of the 3. So I'm going to grab these as well to kind of match up and create our neutral or 0 pairings. So here I go, and bear with me. Okay, so now I can actually take away 7 negatives because I've created my 0 groupings. So by doing that, I'm going to actually just erase what I have here. And what do I have left? Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 positives, which means that a 3 take away negative 7, positive 3 minus a negative 7, whatever you want to call it, is equal to a positive 10. And now that you understand the concept, we can go ahead and recap the shortcut, which is you can just do 3 minus minus 7 is the same thing as just grabbing these 2 and making a plus, and you get positive 10, which is what we got down here. Our second last question is a negative 6 plus 2. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write my negative 6 as negative 6. I'm going to keep this as plus, and I'm going to do 2 positives, so it's going to be like this. So let me grab 6 negatives here, and let me grab 2 positives here, right? Because I'm adding them together, so I'm creating a whole group. But the issue here is that these guys will cancel out, say, because they are equal to 0. So what I am actually left with are 4 lovely negatives. So the answer to negative 6 plus 2, or negative 6 adding 2 positives, is going to be negative 4. And finally, our last question here is a negative 1 take away a negative 5. And what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to rewrite it sort of like this. Negative 1 minus, or take away, subtract, a negative 5. So here I go. I'm going to grab a negative 1. But once again, my issue is that I cannot take away 5 because there's literally no other negatives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5 negatives, but I'm not going to forget that because I'm kind of manipulating it and adding it on my own, that I'm going to group them, right? So 5 negatives here, 3, 4, 5, and then here are 3 positives. So I still have negative 1, but now I can actually take away 5. And actually, I don't need this one here. I'm so sorry. I don't actually need that one here because I only needed to add 4. So in the end, I have 5 negatives. Now I can take them away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that means that I am left with 4 positives. So the answer to this question is positive 4. But because we have this on the board, and because I also mentioned to you about the shortcut, another way to do this would be negative 1 plus 5. And so if you did negative 1 plus 5, of course you would just do negative 1. You would grab a negative. You're adding 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what happens is you cancel this one out, right? This one goes away, and once again you're still left with 4 positives, which is exactly our answer. So a few different ways of doing it, but I do encourage the use of tokens, positive and negative tokens, canceling them out, and also recognizing what in your question is positive and what in your question is negative. And of course, taking into consideration the operation. When you're adding something like this, you are literally grabbing 6 negatives and 2 negatives, adding them together and crossing them out if you need to. Whereas if you are subtracting, you have to recognize what it is you're taking away and what you need to do that. So for example, if you're starting with a negative 1 and you're taking away negative 5, you don't have 5 to take away right now, so you have to add them and neutralize them to make your 0 group pairings for example. So I hope that this video has helped you in some way. And again, this is just one way of doing addition and subtraction of integers.